which will harm our province and harm the country. And that is not acceptable, not for a government that is at, what, 20% in the polls?
Wow, what you're about to see will blow your mind. Welcome back to Boost and Lose. My name's David. Today we've got Danielle Smith absolutely destroying Justin Trudeau, Stephen Guilbeault and the Liberal government. She just completely obliterates them. She rips them apart for minutes. We've also got Stephen Guilbeault has basically been caught. The Liberal government has been lying about their climate numbers, the emissions numbers in Canada. Guilbeault's policies are not reducing Canada's emissions. Even the NDP humiliates Stephen Guilbeault in the House of Commons. Let's check this out. We've got a bombshell dropped on us here today. So as you can see here from Conservative Dan Mazier, it says Canada's Environmental Commissioner has revealed the Liberals are fake environmentalists. They've been faking the environmental reports. It says despite punishing Canadians with a costly carbon tax, the Liberals will not meet their emissions targets. In fact, Canada has the worst record in the G7 for emissions reductions under Trudeau's radical environment minister. This is hilarious. The one thing that they're supposed to be good at here in Canada, the environment, climate change, they're the worst. As this article says, Canada on track to miss 2030 emissions targets. This was even brought up today in the House of Commons.
According to the Commissioner, the Liberals are deceiving Canadians with, quote, unreliable emission reduction estimates. Wow. It's all pain, no gain. Why are the Liberals driving Canadians to food banks with their costly carbon tax with getting nothing in return?
Mr. Speaker, the Commissioner's report looks back at what's been happening since 1990. And you know what didn't happen under the Harper years, Mr. Speaker? Any type of action on climate change. No measures for energy efficiency. No measures for transit. No measures for electrification of transportation. No measures for renewable energy.
And you know what else we didn't have? Unruly amounts of inflation, high prices on everything, people sleeping in tents. Does he not understand the correlation here? He's quite literally admitting he's the problem in Canada. How did this criminal get into our government?
This has changed since 2015, and we've bent the curves. We were going to miss our 2030 targets by at least 30%. We're 7% below 2005 levels. That's because of what we've been doing. It's about climate, it's about jobs, it's about the economy, and it's about the safety of Canadians.
Like the safety of Canadians who had to run from their homes in Jasper as the town burned down? This guy is like an absolute joke.
Mr. Speaker, we can't believe a word the Liberals say on environment. Even the Environment Commissioner revealed the Liberals misled Canadians on their emission claims. Right. He stated, quote, the recent decreases to projected 2030 emissions were not due to climate actions taken by government. Right. While the Environment Minister punishes Canadians with a carbon tax, Canada's worst record in the G7 for emissions reductions under the Liberals. Now that the truth has been exposed by the Commissioner, will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election?
Thank you very much. And what the Auditor General confirmed is that Canada's emissions are down below levels that we haven't seen since the mid-1990s. And we've proposed more measures to drive our emissions down, and the Conservatives want to work against us.
Propose more measures to make Canadians' lives more miserable. This guy's an absolute disgrace. Him and Guilbeault, all these guys, are a bunch of worthless losers.
What the Conservatives have confirmed today is they don't work for Canadians, they don't care about the environment, they don't listen to science, and they want our emissions to go up, Mr. Speaker. The failed former leader from Regina Capel has said repeatedly that our emissions are superior to other countries and they should be driven up. We should be given that permission to produce more greenhouse gas emissions than other countries, Mr. Speaker. Not on this side of the House. We believe in science and we're fighting climate change.
Oh, God, this guy doesn't realize how stupid he looks. Failed former leader? Dude, you've never been a leader. You're a crumb snatcher in the Liberal bench. Why would you even try to take that shot? Here we've got Canada's Climate Commissioner confirming this.
You see any way that the government could meet its target if the carbon pricing, the federal carbon backstop was eliminated?
Is there any way to meet the target if you don't use carbon pricing? There are lots of different ways of reducing emissions, lots of different policies and instruments, regulations, laws, and so on. It's up to the government to decide what is in its portfolio of measures. They happen to have 80 in this plan, plus another 37 coming. There's no research to show that you can only reduce by choosing a selected measure or another. It's whether the measures are effective, whatever ones are chosen. We say you need to prioritize the measures and you need to become much more transparent about the efficacy of those measures and report on it in a timely manner so that they can course correct. None of those things have happened in Canada over the last 30 years. And for that reason, Canada is the only country in the G7 whose emissions are higher now than than in 1990 compared to the other countries.
Workers in Alberta and the energy sector can have a future in a carbon-constrained world.
But what this also shows is that it is doable. Some of these places have quite different approaches to reducing emissions, but they've all managed some level of reduction since 1990. So that gives me some optimism. It's difficult to have some optimism reporting on climate change in Canada, but this gives me a little bit of optimism when I see that other G7 countries have reduced emissions. So it's the fact that our past performance has been such is not an automatic predictor that future performance will be yet another missed target. If the will is there, and the measures are effective and implemented in a timely manner, it's possible. It's just a question of will.
This is disgraceful. We've been saying it all along. The whole carbon tax thing is just a scam. It's just a tax. They're just taking our money. It has nothing to do with the climate. They don't care about the climate. They're using this to get rich for themselves. The comment section here is funny. So Stephen Guilbeault is getting destroyed by everyone here, including the NDP. Check this out.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government's record on the environment is pathetic. We're in a climate crisis, and the Liberals aren't getting the job done. The minister announced regulations to cap emissions from the oil and gas sector that'll take effect in 2030 in order to reach our 2030 targets. Today, the Commissioner of the Environment just confirmed that the Liberal plan isn't working. In fact, Canada comes in last in the G7. Will the minister finally do his job, or should he go back to climbing the CN Tower? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Monsieur le Président, the NDP are no longer progressives and they're no longer environmentalists.
It's funny, though, because Jagmeet's not there today. His underlings have come out and are flinging mud. There's a couple other NDP interactions here where they're kind of grilling him much more than Jagmeet ever does. So it really goes to show that pension and Jagmeet, he is like the shield, not only protecting the Liberals from the Conservatives, but protecting the Liberals from the NDP.
The Conservative Party of Canada is talking about climate change. We should note this somewhere in the book because it doesn't happen very often. If only they would talk about the fact that for 10 years they did nothing, which is why we had to pick up the slack from what when we came into power, emissions were going to overshoot 2030 by more than 30%, Mr. Speaker. Emissions are down by 8% because of our plan, the lowest emissions in 25 years, no thanks to the Conservative Party.
This nut job has to go, let's be honest.
Pick up the slack. Under their policies, Canada keeps falling on performance indexes. The only thing this carbon tax is doing is making Canadians poorer, and the results are devastating. A damning new report from the Salvation Army shows the human suffering this Prime Minister is inflicting on Canadians. Let's look at the report. First-time users of food banks shot up this year from 43% to 58%, and 1 in 4 parents are eating less so their children can eat. This is in Canada. How can he be so cold-hearted? Why won't he at least let Canadians decide in a carbon tax election?
I mean, how do you even respond to that? Like, we've got 2 million Canadians having to use a food bank, record numbers, and they don't care. It's not a climate agenda, it's a money agenda.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians will soon pause to remember the brave men and women of Canada's armed forces who served our country and made the ultimate sacrifice. Whether in Flanders, on Juno Beach, the hills of Korea, or the sands of Afghanistan, they fought for Canada, for our democracy, and the freedoms that we all enjoy today. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to wear this country's uniform. I believe in our democratic institutions. I believe all members of this House are duty-bound to accept and hold high the torch passed from those fallen in the defense of Canada. Mr. Speaker, I respectfully ask the government if they all can say the same.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we all admire the sacrifice and service the veterans have given to us. I think that question looks quite out of line. However, as it is Veterans Week, I think it does.
Okay, enough of the word salad. Kevin Vaughan just dropping the bombs here on these Liberals. It's hilarious. We've got Danielle Smith here absolutely going off on Justin Trudeau and Stephen Guilbeault. This is a fiery one.
Ottawa released details of its oil and gas production cap. It is not an emissions cap. It is a production cap. This cap violates Canada's Constitution. Section 92A clearly gives provinces exclusive jurisdiction, may I say that again, exclusive jurisdiction over non-renewable natural resource development. And yet this cap will require a production cut of an estimated 1 million barrels per day by 2030 and 2.1 million barrels per day by 2035, according to S&P Global. We will continue to defend our province and our constitutional rights. We will also continue to defend the livelihoods of the estimated 150,000 workers nationwide who will lose their jobs as a result of this cap. We will continue to defend the families all across this country who will be left with $419 per month less to be able to pay for groceries and mortgage payments and utilities. We will continue to defend Albertans and Canadians who rely on revenues from oil and gas to pay for the public services that they desperately need, including healthcare, education, law, justice services, roads and bridges. To give you an idea, 1 million barrels a day of lost production at an average rate would cost us in royalties anywhere from $3 billion to $7 billion per year. To put that into context, we spend $2.2 billion on roads and bridges. It would wipe out our entire roads and bridges budget. We spend $3.2 billion supporting assured income for the severely handicapped. It would wipe out that entire program. We spend $2.5 billion on post-secondary for their operating budgets. Again, it would wipe out that entire program. The losses to GDP mean $28 billion will disappear from the Alberta economy, and nationally, $97 billion. Those losses put public services at risk, not only here, but also at the federal level and through the transfers to other provinces. Ultimately, this cap will lead Alberta and our country into economic and societal decline. And once again, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is putting reckless policy ahead of the needs and concerns of everyday Canadians. I made note that he would do this on his way out the door. It's like a bad renter who's burning the furniture on their way out. He needs to call an election now to seek a mandate to do this, not only to our province, but to the country. Once again, Ottawa is putting up roadblocks instead of providing solutions to global energy security. And make no mistake, Alberta and Canada have the ability to provide security to the world. Instead, Justin Trudeau continues to choose to outsource that duty to provide safe, affordable, reliable, and responsibly produced oil and gas to dictators and less clean producers around the world. And tweaks won't work. This cap must be scrapped. As the Business Council of Canada said earlier today, and I quote, imposing an oil and gas emissions cap will only make Canadians poorer. Strong climate action requires a strong economy. The cap will leave us neither. A de facto cap on oil and gas production would restrict cross-border energy trade and harm our shared economic and security interests. Albertans and all Canadians can rely on our government to actively explore the use of every legal option, including a constitutional challenge and the use of the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act. We will not stand idly by while Justin Trudeau sacrifices our prosperity, our Constitution, and our quality of life for his extreme agenda.
She's going off on him here. And just think, now that Trump is going to be president again down in America, he's going to make the business environment more lucrative for businesses to move from Canada to America. It's just going to make things worse. Trudeau can still do a lot more damage to our country before he's out the door next October. It's like he's trying to destroy and hurt us as badly as possible.
Premier, I'm just wondering what you expect a timeline would be if you were, and do you plan to take this to court? Because we just were hearing, I think it was last week, we talked about the carve-outs, and that took a year for you to take to judicial court.
Well, as soon as possible. I mean, I'll get my justice minister working on it immediately, and we'll start drafting a motion under the Sovereignty Act immediately as well. So we're going to act very quickly.
And then in Ottawa, Minister Guilbeault said, let me pull up the quote, speaking about your...
So just before she says it, you can see she's making these facial expressions like, It's no mystery that Danielle Smith doesn't like Stephen Guilbeault. It's just funny to see it all over her face.
Government, they will continue doing stupid things, and we will continue doing things to help Canadians. What is your response?
Absolutely not. He is not helping Canadians. He is harming Canadians. 150,000 job losses, the loss of production, which means the loss of revenue, not only for us, but for the rest of the country. An increase in cost on every family's budget to the tune of $419 per month, each and every month. This is not responsible policy. This is a vendetta. Like, he has a deranged vendetta against Alberta. It's very obvious. We've been watching it for some time. He's trying to find a way to get around what the Constitution says. He even acknowledged that they are not permitted to do a production cap because it is natural resources fall under provincial jurisdiction. Somehow he thinks he's going to sneak one in and we won't notice and the rest of the country won't notice. Well, we've noticed, and we think the courts will notice. He cannot do this.
Wow. Guilbeault has officially pushed Danielle to the edge and over the edge. She's not having it here.
You sound angry. Why are you emotional about this?
I'm pissed. I'm absolutely angry. Because we've been working with these guys for 2 years, because we have a plan that would reduce emissions responsibly by 2050. And they continue to act like they're working collaboratively with us, and then they come out with exactly the same policy that they put forward a year ago, with no changes whatsoever, and then they're trying to mislead the public about its intent. And mislead the public about our true record. In 2018, we had 159.3 megatons of emissions from our oil and gas sector. In 2022, the most recent stats available, 158.3 megatons. So he is not even telling the truth. We are seeing an increase in production and a decrease in emissions, exactly like we said we would, because we're relying on technology. We're also going to know that we can decrease global emissions by getting more of our cleaner burning oil and natural gas to the world. They know that. We've told them that. The public knows that. And yet they persist in this pathway, which will harm our province and harm the country. And that is not acceptable. Not for a government that is at, 20% in the polls? Not for a government that is on its way out the door. It cannot destroy the most important industry in the country by targeting our province with this kind of unilateral action. We just won't stand for it.
I'm baffled that the reporter asked, why are you pissed? Why are you angry? Because it's going to destroy Canada. What kind of stupid question was that? I love Danielle Smith's response here. Ripping Trudeau, Guilbeault brought up the 20% in the poll. That's savage.
Guilbeault said today that the oil and gas sector has done less than most other sectors to reduce its emissions, its carbon footprint. So how much do you agree with that statement?
He's wrong. Minister Schultz will tell you, we set an aggressive target to reduce methane emissions 45%. By 2025, we achieved that target early, and we have all kinds of proposals that have come forward. We've got Dow Chemical with their net zero petrochemical plan, which is going to decarbonize the petrochemical industry. We've got Air Products with their net zero hydrogen facility, which will create a new form of fuel, not only for home heating and transportation, but also potentially for electricity generation. We have Heidelberg that is working towards a final investment decision for net zero cement, which will decarbonize cement, which is the second most traded commodity in the world. All of that is happening right here in Alberta. We have the Pathways Project, which just started a pathway to get to net zero by 2050. We have Capital Power and others who are looking at ways that they can bring nuclear into our province, which takes time to be able to develop the regulatory process and get approvals. We have seen dramatic improvement on the part of our largest producers because they're investing in technology. Technology takes time. You cannot snap your fingers and say it has to be done by 2026. You cannot snap your fingers and say it has to be done even by 2030 or 2035. The only way to achieve these unrealistic targets is to shut in our production. I know it. They know it. We're calling them out on it, and they have to stop it.
This is awesome. I wish we'd see more premiers call out the Liberal government like this.
Stephen Guilbeault also said that basically you, Pierre Poilievre, and Scott Moe don't believe in climate change. What do you have to say to that?
That is just absolute nonsense. And he continues to say such things because he's trying to demonize our province, and he's trying to demonize our sector, and he's trying to justify unconstitutional policy. And it's absolutely unacceptable. We expect our national leaders to engage in nation building as opposed to nation destruction. And that is what they are doing by having a particular type of emissions cap targeted to our particular industry that is going to impact our particular province for no other reason than to be vindictive. And that's what's got to stop. We have always said that we are prepared to work with the federal government, and we have worked with them on the Dow Chemical Project, on the Air Products Project, on the Heidelberg Project. And so there is absolutely no justification for this other than because they think they can get away with it, and they can't.
So you think?
Wow, she's on a rampage today. I mean, really, the whole climate movement in Canada should just be what it always has been. We want clean water, we want clean streets, we want a clean Canada. When you go to places like Indonesia, Philippines, India, you often see rivers just filled with garbage. There's no climate plan over there. That's what the climate plan should be. It shouldn't be how can we tax our population into poverty. It should be how do we use some tax dollars and build up culture which protects our environment, makes our environment clean and beautiful. But in Trudeau's Liberal world, they're just using it to steal our money.
Can I quote, that it's a deranged vendetta? You don't think it's for the common good, for fighting climate change?
Absolutely not. If he was working towards the common good, he would be working with us on a strategy to reduce emissions over time by 2050 so that we can make sure that we're adopting the best available technology, giving the time for the industry to develop that, develop the market so that we can export our product to reduce emissions nationwide. Heck, if we were to reduce the reliance China has on coal-fired plants with our clean burning LNG, just 20% conversion of their coal plants would be net zero for Canada. It would remove the equivalent of the same amount of emissions of our entire country. Those are the kind of things that he should be focused on.
It's interesting she brought that up because I did the math. It worked out to be pretty much the exact same thing.
And instead, he's trying to shut down our industry, and we see it.
Minister of Environment for China, Minister of Environment for Canada.
Well, he's on a national panel in China that he went to a year ago. He seems to think it's okay for China to have a 2060 target and for him to engage in advising them, meanwhile asking us to achieve unachievable emissions targets. He should be putting Canada first. He should be putting Alberta as a province first, and he's not.
Thanks, Premier.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, bringing that up where China's on a 2060 timeline. Why is it okay for them? They're the big polluter. They should be on the 2035 plan. Canada should be the one on the 2060 plan. She said it perfectly, though. Guilbeault is working for China. He's not working for Canada. He puts China first. One thing that's been very clear about everything with the Liberal government is we need a new set of rules in Canada where the Canadian public can call a referendum to get rid of a party in power, a political leader in power. There should be multiple different versions of this because it's clear the Liberal government are doing everything possible to hurt Canadians.